Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Around the Table with the AOTR. So, if you're checking your podcast feed today expecting the scheduled round table, let me pull back the curtain immediately. My original guest, George Goulburn, it seems that he had another meeting come up and we have had some scheduling conflict. And also, Bev is having a hard evening. And so it's best if I just do a solo episode tonight. So, independent media doesn't get the luxury of, really having a lot of time given for these kind of circumstances. So if someone has an issue or there's a no show or last minute silence, you kind of have to go with the flow, right? So having been at my table, you guys know that when there's things to discuss, I'm going to discuss them because that's how I operate. So instead of letting myself get frustrated with the fact that things fall apart sometimes, I am here and turning the mic on and talking to you this evening. So, we're going to talk about reliability, we're going to talk about boundaries, and we're going to talk about the dissection of the absolute toxic dysfunctional mechanics that go into modern activism and independent advocacy. So I've been doing this for a while, y'all. When you operate in high stakes environments, whether you're dealing with the legal system, independent press, or grassroots movements, the baseline currency is respect for time and operational integrity, right? But what happens a lot instead? People treat commitments like suggestions. They treat other people's labor like a disposable resource. They become entitled and expectant. So I'm going to take the next few minutes to map out the intersectionality of this all. We're going to connect the macro to the micro. We're going to be looking at the massive crushing pressure cooker of political figures like Jake Lang. And we're going to look at the intense daily reality of on the ground, boots on the ground activists, such as my friend Dave the Viking, Jolly Good Ginger, Echo Romeo Resists. And we're going to correlate that directly to why solid, visible advocates, such as Jolly and Echo, are about throwing their hands up and talking about quitting entirely. So grab a seat and let's get into it. To understand why grassroots spaces are fracturing, we have to look at the top of the pressure cooker. So first, we're going to talk about the January 6th insurrectionist, neo-Nazi fucking idiot, Jake Lang. And I'm not afraid to put it that way. There are people that I guess love him, but most of us with any sense hate him for the things that he's done. And you can view him through whatever political lens that you hold. I'm not here to even talk about that. But look at the raw mechanics of his trajectory. We're talking about a guy who spent 4 years doing all this, or 5 years, honestly, doing all this from January 6th to now, and basically secured himself a high profile, I don't want to say career, how can I put this? Griftership, and has just went wild going all over to different states doing incredibly astounding things. And has put himself back into the legal and media blender, almost as if he's seeking to do that, as if it's performative almost. And just this week, he's been back in the headlines after being arrested on criminal trespass warrant down in Frisco, Texas, which, according to Mercado Media, from what I just seen, he has now since been released. This is following his active series of hyper-visible, high-tension public demonstrations. I mean, we're talking about the felony property damage charges in Minnesota, and just the fact that this guy is living in a permanent, unyielding state of legal warfare and public scrutiny. When you are that deep in the machine, the system doesn't just prosecute you, it completely strips away your human standard boundaries, right? So the public nature of that kind of fight demands total constant output. It turns a human being into a walking symbol. And I feel like that's what he wants to be, honestly. And so then now that he has become that symbol, he's relishing it. Like, he doesn't want to be seen as just a normal person. He wants to be like glorified in some sense in what he's doing. And it feels like, to some degree, he does get that, but it's insane to me. It's like he's just a constant billboard for hate filled vitriol at every turn. And it seems like it's scripted out and it's intentional. It doesn't equate for me. Like, it's hard for me to look at that and not see the performative act of this guy just trying to make the optics insane as he delivers these terrible hate speech performances. So, he's like, I don't know. But looking at Dave the Viking, you can see that he's a highly visible figure in these spaces, stepping to the front, trying to be a person as a white male who stands up and protects BIPOC people. And he's on the ground. He's dealing with the daily crushing pressure of public expectation and the endless noise from social media, as are we all. And then there's the constant threat of the bad actors trying to soften off energy from other people so that they can orchestrate downfalls. And we're all seeing that. So when you're a public facing advocate like Dave, everyone kind of wants a piece of you. Like they want your time, they want your endorsement, they want your presence at their rally, they want your emotional bandwidth, they want you to be helping them get to demonstrations like something that Echo talked about recently. And, you know, here's the trap because you care about the cause, your instinct is to say yes. Your instinct is to think, if I don't show up, then who will? But sometimes you have to look at the cost. The intense daily pressure of being a visible shield for a movement means your personal life, your mental well being, and your literal peace of mind get completely swallowed up by the monster if you do not build a fortress around yourself. The system and the chaotic crowd surrounding it will eat you alive and call it a sacrifice for the cause. Not to say that that's not sometimes necessary, but that shouldn't be what the end goal is. So this brings us to the domino effect. When the pressure is this unyielding and when the internal mechanics of a movement provide zero support, people begin to break. That's how movements break apart. Recently, we've seen a massive wave of solid, dedicated people talking about stepping back, walking away, or quitting entirely. Just look at what Jolly said. Look at Echo. These aren't people who just woke up one day and stopped caring about justice or the mission. These are some deeply invested individuals who have reached the absolute end of their rope, who are seasoned at what they do, who've been doing everything they can to be those boots on the ground, vocal advocates to ensure that people that are in terrible situations aren't forgotten about at the expense of all of these things, as I said. So let's be entirely real about why people wave the white flag. They don't quit because of the external enemy. You can prepare for the opposition. You can steel yourself against institutional corruption or political pushback. That's what you signed up to fight for. You expect that. People quit because the internal mechanics of the movement that they're actively working in is destroying them. And that's not what should be happening. So modern activism has this deeply toxic, unwritten rule. It's like it demands total, unmitigated martyrdom. It treats human beings like they're a disposable asset. And that collective mindset dictates that if you aren't bleeding for the cause 24/7, then somehow you aren't dedicated enough. And that's hogwash. So what happens to people like Jolly and Echo? These are actual veterans, servicemen, and also advocate activists. They look around and realize their tanks are completely empty and dry. They're realizing they're pouring from an empty cup into a leaky bucket surrounded by people who keep poking holes in the bottom of it. And you cannot sustain a movement when the culture of that movement treats its most active participants as fuel to be burned up and discarded. Burnout isn't a personal failure of stamina. It's systemic failure of design, and we have to remember that if we actually give a shit here. Let's talk about the intersectionality about all of that, okay? Because this is where the wheels completely come off. How do ego, unhealed trauma, political pressure, and atrocious communication intersect to create toxic advocacy spaces? Too often, grassroots spaces become magnets for people who haven't processed their own stuff. Instead of doing the internal work, they weaponize their personal trauma as a form of political currency. They use the quote unquote mission as an ideological shield to justify treating their peers, their co hosts, their managers, and their fellow advocates with complete and utter disrespect. They think because they are fighting a big battle, they are exempt from basic human decency or something. Like operational standards or reliability should just be put to the side? No. When a movement allows ego to dictate strategy and when it prioritizes theatrical outrage over structured, disciplined work, it begins to eat itself from the inside out. You get the kind of environment where people don't show up for work, where allies turn on each other for clout, and where energy vampires actively drain the very people keeping the lights on. This is exactly why drawing hard, uncompromising lines is not a betrayal of the cause. It is the only way to survive it. So, even looking at what I had to do today, I had a choice. I could have just thrown my hands up, canceled the broadcast because of the fact that there were things that happened with my guest and also my co-host, and I could have just let that derail the entire thing. But instead, I drew a boundary. I closed the door to any chaos. I collected myself. I sat down to the table and I claimed the space to discuss an important topic. A very important topic, I might add. So, if you are out there on the ground, whether you are facing legal battles like Jake, managing talent and public narratives like me, standing on the front lines like Dave and I, or hitting a wall because you've done everything you can and you've been on these front lines in countless different places like Jolly and Echo, hear me loud and clear. Your peace is non negotiable. Drawing a boundary means saying, I value this cause, but I value my insanity too. I will give you my labor, but I am not going to give you my servitude like a slave. If I end up giving up my life for the cause, it is because something out of my control happened in my attempt to protect and defend others. I will respect your platform, but you will damn well respect my time, my space, and my boundaries too. Because if you don't set those parameters for yourself, the dysfunctional mechanics of the world around you will gladly step in and dictate your limits for you, and they will choose the breaking point. Don't let them. So, as we wrap up this solo session of Around the Table with Authors of the Resistance, I want to leave you with this final thought. When you are fighting a massive political battle on a national stage, navigating the exhausting waters of public advocacy, or just trying to build an independent platform from the ground up, you have to protect your perimeter. The integrity of your work is entirely dependent on the integrity of your boundaries. When you let people slide, when you excuse chronic unreliability, when you allow people to constantly drain your energy without giving anything back, you aren't being understanding. You are subsidizing their dysfunction at the expense of your own mission. Respecting your own time, your own contracts, and your own mental health sets the absolute baseline standard for how the world is allowed to treat you. To everyone out there dealing with the burnout, to the advocates wondering if it's time to step back, and to everyone trying to find sanity in the middle of the noise, take a breath, draw your lines, and protect your peace. Thank you for sitting with me today. Unfortunately, I was sad that my co host Bev couldn't be here in her usual seat, but the table stays standing. Stay grounded, keep a critical mind where it needs to be, orchestrate constructive criticism, be a free thinker. And we'll see you the next time on Around the Table with the AOTR.